Section 9, Discussion of Agency. Introduction, the conversation that most agents rush through. Throughout this course, we have discussed the evolution of agency, the read form, buyer-broker agreements, compensation, confidentiality, legal hotline issues, the standard of care, and communicating information to clients. Now we arrive at the most important practical skill of all, actually discussing agency with the client. Ironically, agency is one of the most important topics in a real estate transaction, yet it is often one of the least explained. Many agents hand a client an agency disclosure form and simply say, "Sign here." Others explain agency in technical legal language that the client does not understand. Neither approach works. A proper agency discussion is not about getting a signature. It is about helping the client understand who represents whom, what duties are owed, and how the relationship will work moving forward. The course material points out that agency disclosure is often handled inadequately because many agents do not spend enough time learning or explaining agency concepts. The rule of three, one of the simplest ways to understand agency disclosure, is something known as the rule of three. What you say, what you write, what you do. All three should match. If you tell a client that you represent them, the paperwork should support that relationship, and your actions should reflect that representation. If one of those three is different, confusion begins. For example, imagine an agent spends 3 weeks showing homes, negotiating repairs, discussing offer strategies, and giving advice to a buyer. The agent acts like the buyer's representative, but never discusses agency and never provides the appropriate disclosure forms. The buyer may reasonably believe the agent represents them, even if the paperwork says otherwise. Real-world example: the friendly agent. A buyer walks into an open house and starts asking questions. The agent spends 45 minutes discussing market values, negotiation strategies, financing options, and how much the buyer should offer. The buyer leaves believing that agent is helping me. The problem? The agent never explained who they represented. The buyer never received an agency explanation. No documentation exists. The agent may have unintentionally created confusion and potentially an implied agency situation. What is implied agency? Implied agency occurs when a client reasonably believes an agency relationship exists because of the actions of the licensee, even though the relationship was never clearly discussed or documented. The danger of implied agency is that expectations are created without clarity. The client may believe the agent owes them loyalty, the agent owes them confidentiality, the agent is negotiating on their behalf. The agent is protecting their interests. Meanwhile, the agent may have a completely different understanding of the relationship. This is exactly why agency discussions should happen early and clearly. When should agency be discussed? One of the most common questions agents ask is, when should I discuss agency? The answer is simple: before meaningful representation begins. Do not wait until the offer is written. Do not wait until escrow opens. Do not wait until a dispute arises. Agency should be discussed at the beginning of the relationship, so the client understands how the broker will represent them. The read form was designed specifically to help facilitate this discussion and provide written confirmation of the client's election. The National Association of Realtors and Agency Disclosure. The NAR Code of Ethics reinforces the importance of agency disclosure. Article 1, Standard of Practice 1.5, states that realtors may represent both parties in a transaction only after full disclosure and informed consent from all parties. Article 1, Standard of Practice 1.12, requires realtors entering listing agreements to advise sellers about the potential for dual representation. Article 1, Standard of Practice 113, similarly requires realtors entering buyer agreements to discuss the possibility of dual representation. The common theme is transparency. Clients should never be surprised by how they are represented. The question many agents forget to ask. One of the most overlooked agency questions is not, "Are you working with another agent?" Instead, the better question is, "Are you currently bound by any exclusive agreement for real estate services?" There's a big difference. A buyer may be talking with multiple agents. A buyer may have attended open houses. A buyer may have received information from several realtors. None of that necessarily means the buyer is contractually bound. However, if the buyer has signed a buyer-broker exclusive employment agreement, that changes everything. Real-world example, the open house conversation. A buyer visits your open house and says, "We've been looking for months." Many agents immediately begin showing homes. A better agent asks, "Have you signed any exclusive buyer representation agreements with another broker?" The buyer responds, "Actually, yes, but we are upset with that agent." Now you have important information. You should not assist the buyer in violating an existing agreement. Instead, you should explain that they may have contractual obligations to another broker and recommend they review that agreement carefully. Rules updated. Written consent matters. Arizona continues to require transparency when representing multiple parties. Under ARS Section 32-2153A2 and R4 28-1101, a licensee should not represent more than one party in a transaction without the knowledge and written consent of all parties involved. This rule protects consumers by ensuring they understand exactly who the licensee represents. It also protects the licensee by creating documentation that demonstrates informed consent. Disclosure of buyer agency and seller waiver. Occasionally, an agent may encounter a transaction involving a limited service listing broker. In these situations, the listing broker may instruct the buyer's agent to present the offer directly to the seller. This creates unique agency challenges because the buyer's agent represents the buyer but may be communicating directly with the seller. The course material discusses the disclosure of buyer agency and seller waiver and confirmation form, which helps explain to the seller that the agent represents only the buyer and not the seller. This helps prevent misunderstandings during negotiations and offer presentations. Real-world example. The seller wants advice. A buyer's agent is presenting an offer directly to a seller. The seller asks, "What do you think I should counter?" The agent now faces a challenge. The agent owes fiduciary duties to the buyer. The agent must be honest and fair to the seller. The agent cannot suddenly become the seller's advisor. A careful response might be, "I represent the buyer in this transaction. I want to be fair and honest with you, but I cannot provide advice that would conflict with my duties to my client." That is a professional way to maintain agency boundaries. The big lesson: agency discussions should never be treated as paperwork. They are conversations. The best agents explain agency clearly, document it properly, and then act consistently with that explanation. Remember the rule of three: what you say, what you write, what you do. When all three match, agency relationships become clearer, clients are better informed, and risk is reduced. As we move into the next section, we will continue building on these agency principles by examining additional real-world situations where disclosure, representation, and professional conduct intersect. Online discussion questions. Question 1. What is the rule of three in agency disclosure? Answer: the rule of three means that what the agent says, what the agent writes, and what the agent does should all be consistent. When all three match, agency disclosure is clearer and more effective. Question 2. Why can implied agency create risk for a licensee? Answer: implied agency can create risk because the client may believe the licensee represents them, even though the relationship was never clearly discussed or documented. Question 3. Why is asking about exclusive agreements important before working with a buyer? Answer: it helps determine whether the buyer is already contractually obligated to another broker and helps the agent avoid ethical or contractual conflicts.